Hi, viewers, listeners, anyone out there listening to the Steve Perryman podcast. Very happy to be on with you again. We've got Howard, as ever, and Tom, and a very special guest that I've been promising for weeks and weeks to have on. Before we introduce our special guest, Howard, I understand from a good source that it's World Parkinson's Day today. That's close to our heart for reasons that you are now going to explain, please.
Yep, it is World Parkinson's Day, and Parkinson's needs a day because it's a horrible disease which is growing faster than any other in the Western world. So they should have some idea of what's going on. Anyway, it's close to me because I have it. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago. It's a brain disease and it's progressive. And this is sometimes why it may take me a little while to formulate my words. The words are in my head, but I can't always get them out quickly enough. So thank you for the opportunity here.
Well, you're having a good try, Howard. Thank you very much on our behalf. Fantastic. So I'm going to introduce Gary Stevens, a great pleasure, ex-teammate of mine, lives a varied life, having left Tottenham, which he's going to explain to us. So, Gary, welcome to the Steve Perryman podcast.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. A real pleasure to join you, and also Tom and Howard as well. I'm looking forward to having a good chat with you.
Well done. And just tell us what time it is in Thailand there.
It's coming up to 6 p.m. in the evening. So Thailand is 6 hours ahead of the UK.
Brilliant. And I'm not really want to ask this question, but I've got to. And the temperature?
Well, for most of the day, it's been just into the 90s. So it was nice to walk on the beach. I've kept myself in the shade most of the day. But yeah, I'm a privileged person, Steve. There's no doubt about it. I love my life, and I'm probably happier than I've ever been.
You look like you're a picture of health, actually. Do you agree, chaps?
Definitely.
Yep.
It might be a special camera he's got on him, but wow, how good. How old are you, Gary? Just to remind me.
Steve, I had my 60th birthday on the 30th of March, so I'm just turned 60.
Wow. That you don't look 60. Trust me.
Well, do you know, it's really funny. Most people say to me, you haven't got any grey hair. And well, I've got a lot more grey hair than shows, to be honest with you. But, you know, like I'm a hairy monster.
Yeah, you are.
I really am.
Always have been.
Yeah, exactly. Two shaves a day type gentleman, But no, I'm blessed. And I do look after myself. I've got to be honest, Steve. I've maybe abused myself a little bit in the past, but for the last probably 8 to 10 years, I've tried my best to look after myself.
And what sort of weight are you as against your playing weight?
I'm about 3 or 4 kilos below what I used to play at. And that's mainly because I've lost muscle. I don't have the definition and the bulk that I used to have. Yeah. Because I exercise, because I lead a good life, what I eat, what I drink, basically I don't put weight on, which is fortunate. And so therefore, which is what, half a stone, I suppose, 8 kilos, just over half a stone lighter than I used to play at.
Fantastic. Well done, you. Howard, we used to socialise together, didn't we? Ourselves and Gary's family and Ray Clements and stuff. You had some good days at your house there.
The highlight, I guess, has to be the UEFA Cup final '84. We all had dinner together after the game, which was just fantastic. It was just a shame that Steve couldn't play in it.
Yep.
But he'd done enough to get us there. And there are lots and lots more histories that we have between us. And we try and catch up when we do, don't we?
Some good times, eh?
Yeah.
Some good times. So, Gary, just getting into it, how long have you been in Thailand and what's your life consisting of now?
I've been here about 8 years now. I came out originally to be the head coach of a team in Bangkok in the Thai Premier League, which was Army United. I came out here via Leicester City Football Club and King Power. King Power, of course, are duty-free in Thailand, and at the time and pretty much now still really, the army are heavily involved in running the country. So I suppose if you're involved in duty-free, then it's good to be involved with the people running the country. So that's how that came about. And of course, the inevitable happened. So I got sacked at Army, but we'd done really well. So my reputation was quite high. So I got myself another job, which was with another Thai Premier League side called Port. Long story, but won't go into it. And of course, got sacked from there, as you do. I've had numerous opportunities to get back in, and I've declined all of them because I decided I didn't want to deal with the hire and fire here in Thailand, which is probably worse than the English Premier League, the English Football League. And I basically decided to retire, and I moved out of Bangkok to a place called Hua Hin, which is a coastal town, a seaside tourist type area, loads of golf, some really good sports facilities. And my only involvement now with football is that I have a link with Black Mountain Hua Hin Football Academy, which we have about 60 kids train with us 3-4 times a week. And I pop in twice a week and I help the coaches out, and I enjoy that. I play a lot of golf, and I live a privileged life, Steve. That's it.
Brilliant. And do you have a link through TV? Do you have an opinion on the Premier League, etc.?
Well, yeah, I suppose that's one thing that I've forgotten. And I suppose, what was it, maybe 3-4 years ago, I got involved with Astro Super Sports, which is the equivalent of Sky Sports in Malaysia. And I started to fly from Thailand to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, cover 2 or 3 Premier League games, and then fly back on the Monday morning. And I still do that, except that, because of the travel problems, I now sit in my condo here in Thailand and I do it on Zoom. Yeah. So I don't have to travel, don't have to fly. The last weekend that's just passed, I didn't do a game for them, and I actually watched 5 games across the weekend, full 90 minutes, because you get every single game out here.
Yeah. I've got to tell everyone, by the way, I don't want to embarrass you, Gary, but when we fixed this up some time ago, eventually it was getting closer and closer to the day, and possibly could have been the first time we played Brighton, but now this is the second time. And Gary said, when we agreed the date, Gary said, so when I come on, Steve, on the Monday, so Brighton would have won at Arsenal, Tottenham would have won at Aston Villa, and so it'll be a good show, Steve. And guess what happened? And I mean,
never in doubt. Never.
Yeah, we're not too surprised about the Tottenham result, but the Brighton result at the Arsenal was staggering as far as we're concerned. Howard, that led us into a great weekend.
Absolutely. Although last weekend was possibly better when both Chelsea got smashed by Brentford, as well as Arsenal losing and us winning 5-1.
Yeah, they're out of reach, Chelsea, Howard. But I know your feelings about them. So you do some TV work, Steve-O, and you've got an opinion on the way things are happening. With your soothsayer's hat on, are we going to finish in the top 4?
Well, it's looking a lot better than it was a few weeks ago, that's for sure. It's so important how you finish, isn't it, in any league, in any season. Tottenham have momentum at the moment. I think Conte's done a fantastic job. I think if you look at the players who've come in, whether it's Romero at the back, Bentancur, Kulusevski, they've all started to contribute hugely. Along with that, the rest of the team, Dyer looks a different player. Lloris was fantastic, wasn't he, against Aston Villa? Everybody seems to be gelling together. So I think if you look at, well, who's going to finish fourth in the Premier League at this precise moment in time, I'd put my hat on Tottenham 100%.
Good. That's a Tottenham voice speaking, by the way.
Yeah.
Tom, you've got some opinion on the change of opinion of Doherty, for instance.
I just think he's just like, I've got so much respect for Doherty, for the way he's turned things around in the last few weeks, last couple of months even. I mean, I think it was probably the Leicester game where he kind of came on and made things happen for for Bergwijn's late equaliser, which we thought was good enough. Yeah, was a wonderful enough goal without even taking into account the following the winner that happened a minute later. But I think the fact that he's been injured, horrible challenge by Cash on Saturday evening. Really cynical when you look back at it. There were a few from the Villa players actually, which looked like they were set out to try and lay one on some of our boys. But the fact that Doherty is now sadly out for the season, and it's a real loss for us, given the way we've been playing and the way he's been contributing to that. And you just could not have imagined 6 months ago feeling the outpouring of disappointment from Spurs fans that Doherty's going to be out for a prolonged period of time, and I think that is huge credit to him and to the manager for how his career has turned around at Spurs in the last few months.
Howard, can you imagine such a turnaround in opinion on a player?
It's very rare to see a turnaround that quick, and that's deep, if you like.
Yeah.
Usually, if once the crowd go against the player, it's very hard to turn it around.
Yeah.
But he seems to. I think.
Well, credit to both him and the manager, because the manager is the influence. Gary, I'd like to talk to you about influence, because you mentioned the academy, and therefore in your development as a player, tell us about that development. Where did it start? At school, or did you tell me that you got released by Ipswich in the younger years?
Yeah, you're right, Steve. So, I was born in Hillingdon, Middlesex, so just west of London, a bit of a hotbed for footballers, Ray Wilkins, Glenn Hoddle, Guy Butters, there's been dozens, to be honest with you, from that region. We moved out of London up to Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk, as a family when I was 6 years of age. My dad was a huge influence on me. He played sort of semi-professional as a goalkeeper, Slough Town, Hillingdon Borough. And yes, I was kind of, reasonably talented, and yes, played for the school, played for West Suffolk, played for Suffolk schools, had England schoolboy trials. A big part of it was at 11 years of age, I started to go to Ipswich Town on a Thursday night, where the talented youngsters in the area were invited. Charlie Woods was the youth team coach at Ipswich at the time. Bobby Robson was in charge of the club, and of course Bobby ran the club from top to bottom. Great admiration for a great man and a great footballing man. And at 14, I signed as an a schoolboy at Ipswich Town, and was hoping to sign apprentice when I got to the age of 16. Steve, you know what it's like with youngsters, peaks and troughs, and you hit a plateau, and from being one of the best players, suddenly everybody else is better than you. And I started pre-season training with Ipswich for the 78-79 season. Ipswich had just won the FA Cup, beating Arsenal at Wembley. And what? The club,
sorry to interrupt. And what position were you then, when you were at that sort of decision age? Because you could play a lot of different positions.
Yeah. Well, I played for a Sunday side, which my dad ran, and him and his mate Pete, they ran it for number one, my dad for me, and Pete for his two boys, Simon and Mark. And my dad played me as a right back sometimes. Then he played me as a centre half. Then he played me in midfield. Then he played me as a left back. And so I learned how to play in different positions. I never played in goal, and I never played up the sharp end, as it were. Yeah. So that was the huge influence from my father to kind of prepare me to be an all-round footballer, rather than maybe the master of just one position. And that worked for me in many ways, but you could argue it also held me back because I was a brilliant substitute. You know, I sat on the bench for England so many times just in case, you know, he needed a right back or a left back or a centre half or a midfield player. Yeah. And, you know, I came on for Peter Reid and for Bobby Robson and for Terry Butcher and Mike Duxbury at right back. So, you know, those were my England appearances, slotting in different positions. Yeah. But if we get back to what happened at Ipswich, so I've started pre-season training. They were a bit naughty, like most of the clubs, because they weren't sure. They should have told me, but they weren't sure. So they kept me hanging on. And after about 3 or 4 weeks of pre-season training, not Charlie Woods, the youth team coach, Bobby Robson called me into his office in the afternoon. Bad news for you. We think you're great, but there's not a future for you here. We want you to get a job locally, but we're not offering you an apprenticeship. He said, if you want to try your luck elsewhere, we'll introduce you to a club. No problems. So after a few tears, as you do, it was a huge disappointment for me. Sure. You know, I spent about a week thinking about it, had a chat with my dad, had an interview to go into the army. Can you believe? Every chance. And I said, thank you for the interview. I'm leaving. Yeah. In the end, I decided my best route was to go to another club. Bobby Robson was good pals with Alan Mullery, and it made sense to try my luck at Brighton. And I went down there. I was with the Ipswich youth team away at West Ham on the Saturday. And on the Sunday, I got on the train and went down to London, down to Brighton, and started a 2-week trial. That 2-week trial lasted for 4 weeks because Brighton weren't sure. And in the end, after 4 weeks, they went, yep, we're going to give you a chance. Here's your apprenticeship for the next 2 years. You're on 16 quid a week as a 16-year-old. And when you get to 17, we're upping it, which was standard, to £20 a week.
Overpaid.
I thought so. I'd never earned any money, Steve.
Amazing. And then your influences as you progress through?
Well, without doubt, Alan Mullery, you know, former Spurs great, who was then the manager at Brighton, and it was him who gave me my apprenticeship. It was him who gave me my debut in the Brighton team when I was 17. I'd been down there about 16 months in total and was playing for the youth team and the reserve team. And Mark Lawrenson was in the first team. He got injured, ironically, away at Tottenham. And the very next week, Mullers on the Monday morning said, Loro's out for a period of time. I'm playing you. You're my reserve team centre-half. You're going to play on Saturday. So, you know, it was all in the open. I had 5 days to prepare for it. And it wasn't until we got to the Friday that I realised that the game on the Saturday was at home against Ipswich Town, who had 18 months earlier rejected me, and Bobby Robson was still the manager.
How many times does it work out like that?
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. So you had your chance, and this is what I'm always saying on this podcast. You know, you've got homegrown players waiting for their chance, and you get an injury, and you go and take someone on loan.
Yeah.
How does everyone feel? That's underneath.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you know, life is about opportunities. So Alan Mullery gave me an opportunity. And that was a huge part of my development. We also had a coach down there called George Aitken, who had played at Middlesbrough. I think he played for Scotland as centre-half. So he worked with me a lot after training. You know, Ken Craggs, because of his association with my father, you know, he was pro me. And you do need people who are pro you because it helps. Simple as that. And, you know, I ended up 4 years in the first team at Brighton, 4 years in the top flight, a cup final at the end of it, and then a glorious move.
Can I just break in there? Howard, when that move happened and we signed, if I'm right, Gary, we signed you and Danny Thomas at the same time. What was your feelings then, Howard?
I thought he looked a class act.
Good. From the Wembley appearances, etc.
Yeah. So then we started with a wonderful defeat, 3-1 at Ipswich, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, again. Was that your first game, Gary?
Yep. So I made my debut for Tottenham away at Portman Road against Ipswich. Yeah.
Amazing. And was you there, Howard?
We were. Rare for us to go that far, but we did. We travelled all the way up there and very unhappily came back.
And another sad day. We make out it doesn't happen from our era, but of course it does. So, Howard, any Alan Mullery thoughts?
Alan Mullery thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, he was a different character to most of the other members of the squad, I think.
Yeah.
And I think when who did he manage? Palace, was it?
Yeah. Palace, Brighton. He was certainly a serious football player. He was a very serious football player. And when I got into the team, he was the captain, and I'm playing alongside him. And wow, you didn't want a greater character to be able to follow. I mean, he was up and at him for his life. Wow. And didn't they call him the Tank at Tottenham?
The Tank, yeah.
Yeah. So he had a varied career, Gary, but he put this onto you. He fed this experience into your game, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. You know, he was always talking to me, you know, after training, after games. You know, Mullers was a motivator, and, you know, he was a bit aggressive at times. If I tell you, he's the only manager who ever pinned me up against the wall at half time and threatened to give me a right-hander. We played away at Coventry, and I had this little habit as a right back of shaping to play it down the line, and as the left winger tried to block it, I'd cut inside him. And Tommy Hutchison was playing for Coventry, and they'd obviously done their homework, and he was an old head. So the first time I go to do it, shape to knock it down the line, cut it inside. Tommy Hutchison, he stood there, takes the ball off me. So, you know, I try and do it a second time. And, you know, Mullers, he's going mad at me, of course. Just knock it down the line, son. So I started knocking it down the line, and then I've tried to get a bit clever again and come in, and Hutchison's taken the ball off me. And at half time, Alan literally pinned me up against the wall, lifted me off the ground almost by the throat, and said, if you cut inside him one more time and lose the ball, you're going to get it. Yeah.
Tough talk. Hard talk.
How was it second half?
Man talk.
Put it this way, I didn't take any chances, Howard.
Sure.
Yeah, he could be very aggressive, Alan, in the dressing room, which was part of his strength, I have to say. He was a leader in all senses of the word, and you know, there's very few of those around these days that are prepared to put their reputation on the line for an opinion of what to do or what you shouldn't do. And I love that in Alan Mullery. And tell us about his motivation, Gary, when you signed your first contract.
Well, I'm 17 years of age. I'm in the first team. I'm now on £20 a week as an apprentice. So I make my debut on £20 a week at home against Ipswich. We had some great bonuses back there. Well, I'm not going to say it because I think it's kind of confidential information. But if I tell you that my win bonus for that day was, let me do the sums, 20 times what I was earning a week, that will give you some sort of, okay, it's 400 quid. We were on 400 quid to win the game then, and I'm on £20 a week. So anyway, the club decide that I've got a future at the club. They want to sign me on a pro contract. Yes, so do I want to sign a pro contract, earn a bit more money. And I got called into his office, and he sat me down and he said, this is the deal, son. This is how much you're going to get paid. I tell you, £100 a week. It's a 5-year contract. There's a £5,000 loyalty bonus, which will be spread across the 5 years. So there's an extra £1,000 a year for you. So you're on about £6,000 a year, plus the bonuses. Sign there, son. And I went, well, can I think about it, Alan? Actually, I didn't call him Alan. I called him boss. And he said, no, you can't. Just sign there. And anyway, I eventually managed to get myself out of the office, told my dad about it and everything. And anyway, Mullers calls my dad into his office after the next home game and sits me down and says, Mr. Stevens, this is what I've offered your son. I think he should sign it. It seems like he's not going to sign it at the moment. He's reluctant. What do you think he should do? And my dad said, well, he does have a mind of his own. I'd already teed my dad up not to get bullied. And then Mullers says to my father, Mike, how much do you earn a week? And my dad, of course,
love it.
My dad wouldn't tell him because it was definitely less than Alan was going to pay me or Mullers was going to pay me a week to play football. He said, so I'm guessing, he said, that I'm going to pay your son more money a week to play football, the game he loves, than you earn in a 40-hour week doing your chief inspector's job at that foundry that makes components for machinery.
Great tactic.
And
great
dad and
tactic.
Yeah. So guess what happened? I signed it.
Yeah. Tell me about the car salesman bit.
The car salesman's bit. Go on. What's this all about?
I just spoke to Mullers, and he before this podcast, and he said that he said to you, when you said you need more money, he said to you, okay, I've got you a job in the local car with the garage, and you can sell cars 2 afternoons a week to boost your money up. And apparently you did it. But again,
I remember him telling me that. Yeah.
Again, bringing you down to earth. And that was what he'd have learned through the Bill Nicholson days. Not that I heard either of those things from Bill, calling the parent in and asking how much they earned. But what good tactics. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, Steve, was although I then signed a pro contract, he said, strictly speaking, as an apprentice, it runs until you're 18. So you're still going to be cleaning the boots. So I had 5 players that I cleaned their boots, including Mark Lawrence and Peter Ward. Who else was there? Teddy Maybank was there. Brian Horton. Yeah. And he said, you're still going to sweep the terracing and you'll still be divoting the pitch with the other trainees. And you'll still be coming in to get the kit out for the first team as well. I was grounded. Yeah. I was kept on the ground.
Yeah. That was an old-fashioned way. Don't let the player get above himself, because then it can all, the path going forwards in your career could start veering off. And, it's now a heavy slap to get you back on. Well, don't fall all over him in the first place. That was the thinking behind it, wasn't it? Well,
yeah, 100%. And I guess you have to look at what happens today with players who sign as a scholar. And, already it's been set out that at 17, they will be given a pro contract. And it's thousands and sometimes into tens of thousands that they're going to get because, that's what clubs have to pay them to keep them, it seems.
Yeah. Gary, just returning to your £400 bonus shout in your early days. This wasn't my era, so I'm not claiming poverty or anything. But you hear stories from before your own era, from the old players. And the common shout by a captain before the teams went out onto the field was, chaps, baby needs new shoes. So put that in relation to the £400 shout. Wow. Yeah. Wow. And I think that's good management. A fee to play, to train, and actually, all that's wasted if you don't get a result at the end of the week. So put the money in the bonus as such. I think that's great.
Yeah, well, definitely. When I was a professional, win bonuses, draw bonuses. At Spurs when we were in the UEFA Cup, we had a group squad situation where we got a percentage of the profits from any of the or all of the 2-legged games, for example, which you were probably involved in the negotiations on that, I would think.
Sure.
But I think what's happened now is that the bonuses are insignificant to players because of the salaries being so big. Good luck to the boys. The players who played before me, were on less than I was on, and I was privileged to earn what I was, and having packed up, the money's just gone up and up and up. And I'd love 10 years in the game at today's rates. But when I was playing in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, for example, a house that I bought when I first went to Tottenham in Broxbourne, fairly close to the likes of Ray Clements, who lived there at the time, and Alan Sunderland was there from the Enemy down the road, and Pat Jennings was in Broxbourne. I know what I paid for it, and it's probably gone up about 15-fold now. So everything's moved on, and we just have to be realistic about it. And I did great. I earned enough, and I'm comfortable, and I can't complain.
And I'm sure that Howard is waiting for these answers. And tell us about joining Tottenham Hotspur.
Well, it was, a special thing for me. First of all, I was disappointed that Brighton wanted to sell me, to be honest with you, because, we got relegated at the end of the 82-83 season, and we got to the cup final. And without being big-headed, I viewed myself as very much one of the key players at the club. And my thought was, well, Brighton need to get back into the top flight. So keep your key players. I'd gone home to see my mum and dad in Suffolk, and the phone rang, and on the phone was Jimmy Melia, who had become our manager at Brighton and took us to Wembley. And Jimmy said to me, "Gary, we've agreed to sell you to Tottenham. Do you want to go?" And my first reaction was, well, why are you selling me? Don't Brighton want to get back into the top flight? And by the way, it took them 34 years to do that. Yeah. And back into the Premier League. And Jimmy said, well, the decision's been made, and it's a financial situation, and this, that, and the other. Probably because they paid us all too much money for a bonus for getting to the cup final, Brighton. I don't know. And it was quite simple. Brighton didn't want me. And hang on a second, we're talking about a top club, a big club, a London club. So he gave me Peter Shreve's number. I spoke to Peter and went down to Tottenham, travelled down. Keith Birkinshaw was away on holiday at the time. We chatted for about 2 hours in the office. We spoke about football, my career, where he felt the club would play me, that they believed they could get me into the England team. And he said, oh, by the way, Gary, it was well choreographed. By the way, Gary, somebody wants to take you out to the training ground to show you Cheshunt. And in walks Bill Nicholson. So, Bill says, hello, Gary, we're pretty sure you're going to sign for us, but let me take you out to Cheshunt. So Bill drives me out in his car, and he takes me around all the back doubles. And we didn't go up the Tottenham High Road to hit the North Circular. We took a left down White Hart Lane and through the back doubles, and near, was it North Middlesex Hospital? I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we dived out that way. And Bill said, as we're going up the A10, if these traffic lights are busy, take a left here. And anyway, we've got out to Cheshunt, and Bill showed me around, and then drove me back to White Hart Lane and took me upstairs in the West Stand for a little bit of lunch, where Peter Shreve joined me. And then we went back into the office and we carried on talking football. And Peter said, well, anyway, listen, you probably best go back home and have a good chat with your mum and dad about this. I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea, because, my mind is spinning, but, what a club, what an honour. Thanks for, giving me the opportunity. And he said, do you want to know how much we're going to pay you? We hadn't even spoken about money, Steve. We hadn't talked about money. It was about football and development and my career and everything. And I went back home, and the second time I came down, my parents came with me as well. Didn't have an agent, didn't have a representative. I'd sought a little bit of advice, but it was deal done.
Yeah. I have huge respect for your parents. You've mentioned them a couple of times. As captain, and Bill Nicholson once gave me a list of about 24 items. If you want to be a captain, this is what you have to think about.
Right.
And I'm not sure other captains got that. But but then you had a few yourself. And one of them was, if I'm going to be captain, meet the people behind the player. Not that that's going to affect you signing. I probably didn't meet you before you signed, or I didn't meet your parents. But within the players' room after games, you, of course, say hello to the people that are in there. And part of it was, I can judge you if I meet your parents. Or I can make a better judgment on you if I see, for instance, arrogance from a parent. Oh, this is, I'm now looking at the player thinking, there's a trait I don't quite like. So it's the package, isn't it? It's the player. It's what you do, what you know you can do, what you think you maybe can't do. Add into all of that, but what's behind him? And that's where you scored. Obviously, you were brought up by good people, brought up the right way, and consistency. That's what we're looking for in people that join clubs. Has he got a consistent life about him? Would you agree with that, Howard, as per Gary's way of dealing with stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, I met Gary's parents as well. And it was quite clear. I didn't have to meet them to know the kind of guy that people they would be because of having met you.
Yeah, I agree with
that.
So
the honesty and the straightforwardness comes through. And things like the UEFA Cup final, one of my abiding images of you is you trotting back to the centre circle, having scored the penalty. And the pressure that you guys must have been under at that time, the penalty shootout was a brand new thing at the time.
Yeah.
And you scored one and Gary Mabbott scored one, I think. And in fact, that team had quite a few players who were filling in different positions because we had such a terrible injury list at the time. But
it was very much a homegrown performance, wasn't it?
It was.
I mean, regular listeners to this will be fed up with me, but that was a victory for homegrown talent. Yes, Steve Archibald. Yes, Gary Stevens in midfield. Yes, Gary Mabbott, of course. But it was all surrounded by homegrown, replacing Ray Clements, Ozzy Ardiles, Steve Perryman, Garth Crooks, And Gary, so when you come back to the bit that you could play different positions, how important was that to the victory? Not just that night, but through the campaign. Mabsy could play in different positions. You could play in different positions.
Yeah. Well, I think it was pretty valuable overall. It's interesting. I said earlier that, it can be an advantage to be a utility player, but it can work against you. I started their second leg of that final on the right side of midfield of a midfield four. And I actually had the number 10 on my back because Glenn wasn't playing. So there was a little bit of weight there. They weren't going to get. They weren't going to get from me what Glenn could give, of course. But they got other qualities from me. And then later on into the game and the extra time period, I played as a central defender. And as Howard rightly mentioned, I took one of the penalties. There was one slight inaccuracy there. Mabsy didn't actually take a penalty, but the penalty takers were Graham Roberts, Steve Archibald, Mark Falco, myself, and Danny Thomas. So those were the five. But, Steve, I'd had a difficult season. I don't know if you remember it as being a difficult season for me in the league. Howard mentioned earlier on about my debut away against Ipswich. I had a shocker. I really had a shocker. And, in early part of the season, and we were going to play away against Liverpool, and Keith Birkinshaw decided to move me out of the back four, and he played me in midfield. And I actually scored at Anfield. You might remember it, Steve. You clipped this little free kick forward to me on the edge of the box, and my job was to flick it on. And as I flicked it on, Souness kind of half got a block on it, and it bobbled, and I helped it on and turned and smashed a volley into the back of the net past Grobbelaar. So you got the assist, Steve. That's the good news there. But just going back, if I can, to that, that run in the UEFA Cup that we had, which was my first season, it got me out of jail, Steve. I had a lot of Spurs fans on my back, whether you were aware of it or not. But I didn't perform well. I tried to be too clever. Should have kept it simple. Didn't. But when I played in the UEFA Cup, I felt free. I felt like it was a freedom, and I enjoyed it, generally speaking. And even for those penalties, this is how people kind of, I don't know, judge you. Before each round, Keith Birkinshaw would say, well, if it goes to a draw after the two legs, who's going to take the penalties? And of course, Robbo wanted one, and Mark Falco and Steve Archibald. And then it always went quiet. And
me,
Keith Birkinshaw...
Quiet. That was me.
and Keith Birkinshaw looked at me and he pointed his finger. He said, you strike a good ball. You should take one. I went, okay, fine. And of course, it didn't go to penalties against Drogheda because we won about 14-0 on aggregate. And it didn't go to penalties against, who else did we play? Feyenoord, against Hajduk Split, against Bayern Munich. And so come the final, like, who wants a penalty? I'm putting my hand up because it never goes to penalties, does it?
Absolutely.
And sure enough, it does. And, again, this was Mullers, going back to Mullers. We played a pre-season tournament in Holland with Brighton, and each game had to go to a penalty shootout if it was a draw. And Mullers wanted me to take a penalty, and he told me how to take a penalty. He showed me how to take a penalty in training, and I used that from Brighton days for that UEFA Cup final. 100%.
Influence.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little story about when you signed and Danny Thomas, and I think we're having the photo day at Cheshunt, and I think maybe a hot day, we get in the shade, we sit in the stand at the old Cheshunt, with the great pitch, and Maxie sits next to me and he says, that's Paul Miller. Viewers, listeners. They've signed them two to replace us two. I looked at him and said, talk for yourself.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and I think that that was looking towards the future. Danny Thomas was younger than me. I was younger than Paul Miller. Progression, etc., etc. But it was about the squad. And you talk about little stories at Cheshunt. You might not remember this, Steve, but it was very early days. We're in the changing room, and there's a bit of banter flying around. We're all sat there having a chat, and Crooksy's there, and you're there, and Raycliffe. And I got a bit cheeky, and I've passed some sort of cheeky comment towards somebody, and your response was, "Oh yeah, just played in a cup final, have you?" And I knew exactly where I stood with you then, because I'd just played in the '83 Cup final and got beaten by Man United, and you'd captained Tottenham in the previous two and won them.
Yeah, and that's how it works.
I don't know if you remember it, but I'll never forget it. Here we are, how many decades later, and it's as clear as a bell. And Crooksy with them big eyes went, "Ooh, you're in trouble."
Tom, lots of younger people listen to these podcasts. So it was before you were born, I suppose, that '84 UEFA Cup win. But have you seen it? Have you seen it over the years?
I was 2 years old.
Drama, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've watched
penalties and the.
Yeah, no, I watched it from very, very early VHS tapes while I was kind of cutting my teeth on the recent history of Spurs while I was kind of getting into it in the late '80s, early '90s as a child. I was kind of obsessed with learning more about what had happened in the years building up to that, and obviously the '84, '81, and '82 were all very key dates in that little bit of Tottenham history education that I undertook while I was growing up.
And I'm going to repeat myself again. Howard, you will remember this. Danny Thomas misses the penalty.
Yep.
And the crowd chant his name all the way back to the halfway line.
Yep.
And my point is, how do the future penalty takers feel having seen Danny miss and get that reaction from the crowd? There was love everywhere. I mean, not that they loved that he missed, of course not, but they supporting their player in a bad moment for him personally. and for all of us at the point. So and then Tony Parks pulls out the next save, and we go through. Chaps, I think we need to wrap this up. Gary, this has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We know a bit more about your current life. Hopefully you'll come back on to us and tell us about working with Tony Adams in, where was it?
Azerbaijan.
Wow. Look, you've traveled the world. You've done it all. So troops, I want to thank you for listening. I'll say thank you to Gary and Howard and Tom on your behalf. Enjoy your life, Gary. Keep looking young. And I just need to give a bit of current news that we'll all be pleased about. Aussie Idealist came home yesterday. That's Sunday. I got that message from Paul Miller, but also Freddie, his son, sent me a message that Aussie's well. I haven't spoken to him. Why would I? Because, you know, I've come home from hospital after all this heart stuff. So you need a few days to settle in, or weeks or months even. So we certainly wish him well. My latest news is that Howard mentioned about the Parkinson's situation with himself. I've just been made I'm the newest patient ambassador of the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust.
Wow. And
I'm going to drop a name in a moment, but very nice people, Catherine and Graham. I'm sure there's others, but I've not met the others yet. But Whispering Bob Harris is also the patient ambassador as well. So I'm sure me and Bob will be having conversations about our particular problems way back then. So the other one, Gary, you may remember Peter Barnes.
Yes, indeed. Sadly passed away recently, yeah?
Passed away, not buried yet. Unfortunately, I can't go to the funeral, but that is such a shame because I like Peter, great man. And, you know, we were a family then, weren't we, Gary? If you remember the time.
Yeah, very much so. You know, Peter Day was the club secretary when I first joined the club. Peter Barnes ultimately took over. Yeah, it was very much a family. It really was. And I got to be honest, Steve, chatting with you here, it feels like we've never been apart, so to speak. And of course, we've been all over the world in different directions, both of us. Wonderful to see Howard, who, you know, became a great friend. I met him and Viv when I first went away with Spurs on the UEFA Cup in the earlier rounds. Stansted Airport was where I first met Howard and Viv. And of course, it's lovely to meet Tom as well, who a younger member of the Spurs fan club as such. So it's been wonderful for me, Steve. Really, a real pleasure.
Gary, can I just add thank you for the taking part in my children's One Day More sing along. You were terrific.
Yes, when Howard reached 70.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure, Howard. Pleased to be part of your 70th.
Thank you.
Great memories. Okay, thank you all. And come on, you Spurs. Let's keep it going. Let's do our stuff against Gary's ex-team, Brighton. Thank you, Brighton, for helping Gary back to prominence, having been released by Ipswich. And Gary was a great member of the 84 UEFA Cup team. And let's go and have some more great evenings like we had after that one, Howard.
Absolutely.
Okay, see you soon. Come on, you Spurs.